Thank you, Mr. Chair. I endorse so many of the comments of my colleagues. Of all of the wrong directions that this secretary is taking our armed services in, and there are many, I think that I feel personally that the demoralization and the decimation of our officer corps and our enlisted ranks as a result of his actions are among the worst. And I don't only talk about today, I talk about the broad implications, the long-term effects of what he is doing in this department. Because this twisted inquisition and purge, for any hint of the horror of thinking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and talking about your own personal experiences as you went through your career, and giving inspiration to other Americans to join the military and to try to achieve their best, is exactly what Mr. Clyburn just called it. That's exactly what it is. You know, to my colleague from Maryland, yes, I also reviewed Mr. Hegseth's record, and I read this quote from his book. When I think about my career in uniform, in almost every instance where there has been poor leadership or people in positions they're not qualified for, it was based on either the reality or the perception of a diversity hire. Think about that comment for a second. Just consider that comment. What does that actually mean? Does that must mean that every single time he encountered poor leadership, it was based on the reality or perception of a diversity hire? Well, a diversity hire does not refer to the hire of a white male. Let's face it. Diversity hire refers to leaders in our armed services that are not white males. And the reality or the perception, does that mean that he's making his judgment just at looking at somebody and perceiving that they are not white males, they're not qualified to lead in every instance? That's an unbelievable statement when you really dig down into it. I guess the next step here is to start distinguishing between white males based on their ethnic group, based on their height. I don't know. I mean, there's lots of things I can see about people. And that's just indicates so much what is going through this person's mind. And let's talk about merit, because my colleague from Maryland rightly pointed out that this should be about merit. That's what we're talking about here today, merit promotion boards. These people have been through a process, a rigorous process. It is so rigorous that people can't say that they're on the merit promotion board. They're being judged by their peers, by their superiors, presumably of all races and genders, by the way. And they were put on those promotion boards because they qualified. They passed the merit test. They're regarded by their peers in the military as having merit to advance, and yet they're yanked off. This is not something that is standard. This is new for a secretary to interfere with a merit promotion board. This secretary went into a merit promotion board that was set up to avoid political influence to start with, and said, I'm going to make a different judgment based on merit because somehow I had a bad experience with the perception of a diversity hire somewhere in my illustrious military career. And that doesn't pass any test. This is personal, by the way. Two of the people on those lists, General C.Q. Brown and Admiral Barnett, are people that I have a personal experience with in Hawaii. I served with C.Q. Brown when he was PACAF, the head of our Air Forces. There was every bit of merit in that person. He didn't deserve that once, not at all. And Admiral Barnett, same thing, came into a very difficult situation in Hawaii and saved the Navy's bacon. And it wasn't just about Red Hill. This was a person that deserved to advance on the basis of merit, and his peers said he should advance on the basis of merit. But he talked about his own experiences and talked about and tried to inspire the next generations into service. What's the consequence? Should I not even consider the military whatsoever anymore if I'm a white male? Hey, in Hawaii, 75% of us are not white. Should I tell all of my people in Hawaii, this is not a career for you anymore? I've just spent the last 8 years trying to get people from Hawaii into the military to consider it a career. But what message are we sending to those people by sanctioning what the Secretary is doing here today? And yet the Secretary, when we ask him these questions, he gives Congress the middle finger. And that's what this is all about. This is the middle finger to Congress. The chair here, I'm sorry, Chair, I disagree with you. You say that this amendment would impede his discretion. And I think that that's our job, to get in his face when we have a problem and when we think that he's doing the wrong thing. I don't care whether it's travel or anything else. That's not the point here. We all know that. The point is, he's doing the wrong thing. We know it. He's telling us, I don't care what you think, and we don't have the guts to call him on it. The consequences of this action and allowing it to happen are going to resonate far and wide beyond the people that are unfairly targeted and affected by this. I yield back.